There's bad news and there's good news. The best news is there won't be much bad news in the near future. I'm Mark Sponsler and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, February 19th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Like and subscribe. Ring the bell. You'll get automatic notifications when the videos are posted, typically on Sunday evenings. All right, let's get to work. We'll start by looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. We see a little fetch of some sort trying to organize, but it's creating south winds aimed up at Alaska, so of no real interest to either Hawaii or the U.S. West Coast, and some sort of a little gale trying to organize off Japan. But all in all, you see a pretty clear outline here of high pressure off California, and that is the theme of this week's forecast. We'll start by looking at current conditions. Up in Half Moon Bay, buoy number 46012. Good representation for Northern California. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting that buoy from 5-second period pure wind chop up to 30.3-second long period energy, which there is none. You see a little bump of something here in about the 17-second range. That is swell from off the Kuril Islands in the North Dateline region. We'll get into that in a second. Then we also see residual swell from previous energy that came from the North Dateline region, 10-second period. Putting this all together, you see primary swell. Okay, the bigger swell is 5.7 feet at 10.3 seconds from 310 degrees. Surf size about head high, 6 feet. And then that secondary swell, 2.5 feet at 16 seconds from 315 degrees. And that swell about chest high, something like that. Quickly doing the same thing for the north end of Southern California, buoy 46053, East Santa Barbara. Again, we see a little bit of energy, mainly just in the 12-second period. That longer period energy hasn't even arrived down south yet, and wind swell there. Putting that all together, primary swell 3 feet at 10 seconds, basically waist high. And then in Southern California, south end, buoy 191, Point Loma South. Again, a little bump of energy at the 12-second period. Primary swell, 3 feet at 11.9 seconds. Let's say waist high, maybe chest high sets. And then finally on the north shore of Oahu, well, not really. Waimea Bay buoy is down, so we have to go to Honolulu. Buoy number 202 over on Kauai. A little pulse of energy, that same swell coming from off the North Dateline region, Kuril Island area at about 14 seconds, and a bunch of east wind swell mixed in there. Primary swell, 4.2 feet at 13.7 seconds from 313 degrees. That makes for swell 6 foot Hawaiian, couple feet overhead, something like that. And then the secondary wind swell, 5 feet at 9.3 seconds from 60 degrees, or about shoulder to head high Hawaii, on the face. Now, where did that swell come from specifically? We're going back to Tuesday, the 14th of February, Valentine's Day. Kuril Islands right here. Swell from this system, pretty much all but gone, other than the little bump at 13 seconds in Southern California. But as we get into Monday morning, even that'll be pretty much gone. Another gale developed off the Kuril Islands in Kamchatka, producing 40-foot seas right here, 40 feet, and that's the coordinates. The highest seas over this entire domain right there, more aimed north than east, and then it pushed off to the east with 39-foot seas as we got into Wednesday, and fading with secondary fetch adding into the mix over the North Dateline region, producing 26-foot seas, and then fading from there. That swell is hitting Oregon into California as we speak, and will continue into Monday, reaching down into Southern California, and then fade out about midway through the week. And that gets us about to where we are right now. No other significant swell-producing systems have occurred. So then we start looking to the future. We'll start at jet stream level. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales when those gales form, and the jet stream helps direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet, just like right here. That helps create a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean's surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure, and of course low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Winds get traction on the ocean ocean surface and start generating seas. Seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, eventually turn into swell. Swell, when it hits your beach, be it Hawaii there or California over there, turns into surf. So the jet stream, pretty much as it's been now for quite a while, consolidated, pushing off Japan, now at 200 knots, reaching the date line, splitting with most energy, ridging hard up into the north like there. Though we do have a bit of a trough there, it's kind of pinched and it's really hard to get a broad circulation going there. So you end up with this jet running north up into, we'll say, northern Canada, British Columbia, running down the interior of the U.S., popping off the coast for just a little bit. This is known as a backdoor trough, then pushing back inland over Baja. Really no weather expected from that. The southern branch wandering down here aimlessly. Typically when you get this split jet stream flow, big high pressure sets up in between, and that's exactly where we are. Put this into motion as we get into Monday. More of the same. The trough pushes down into Baja, the backdoor trough. This other steep trough here pretty much gets cut off as we're into Tuesday. Now another backdoor trough starts setting up off of, we'll say, the Pacific Northwest as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, pushing down the U.S. West Coast, providing the opportunity for some colder air getting sucked down from Canada, and maybe a little bit of moisture. Not that there's piles of moisture associated with this, but just the stark contrast between very cold, dry air and moister, warmer air in front should wring that moisture out and create maybe some rain and some snow, but not a huge weather producer we're expecting. As we get into Thursday, more of the same. The trough deepens some more. High pressure holding the split jet stream. Notice the jet almost splitting off Japan now. So we get into Friday and Saturday, the backdoor trough starts moving inland. Now the jet starts getting more energetic as we get into Sunday, the 26th of February, with winds 180, 190 knots pushing off Japan. But the split point here is like 165 east, something like that. So even well west of the date line, another backdoor trough sets up as we get into Monday, a week from now, and maybe a decent weather producer, but not so much for surf. The issue here is just this massive split. The best we can hope for is it splits even further to the west. That'll allow more of these backdoor troughs to start pushing down the coast and providing rain and snow, and at least we'll eke something better out of this. But from a surf perspective, it looks like the entire middle of the Pacific completely locked down by high pressure. This is the bad news that I was referring to in the intro, and the expectation is that's going to continue for a bit, even despite our best hopes for the MJO. Next up, surface level pressure, surface level winds, high pressure off the U.S. West Coast, not unexpected given the jet stream pattern, 1036 millibars, creating we'll say a weak offshore flow relative to California, but just incessant trades for Hawaii. This has been the issue for weeks there, and it appears to still be the case. We'll put this into motion. Now, a little bit of a low is forecast developing as we get into Monday the 20th, off of Japan, lifting to the north dateline region with 40, almost 45 knot east winds, and a little bit of follow-on fetch behind that on Tuesday the 21st into early the 22nd of Wednesday. But also notice as the high retrogrades and get stronger, 1040 millibars, that cutoff trough in here creates low pressure inland. You get a gradient, a pressure gradient, a tightening of the isobars between the high and the low. That's to generate wind. By Wednesday, 30 to 35 knot winds the whole way from British Columbia down into Southern California and continuing through the day. Then Thursday backing off some, but still 35 knot winds for 24 hours. That'll drop water temperatures even more. The last thing we need, the last gasp of La Nina, trying to hold on. We're waiting for something better to happen. Anyway, Thursday, north winds, 30, 35 knots off the Pacific Northwest, falling down the coast as we get into Friday, and then dissipating off central California late on Friday, early Saturday. High pressure hold trades continue for the Hawaiian Islands. Now, with the high retrograding, you get a little bit of gap here in the northern part of the Gulf of Alaska. You can see some fetch at 40 knots forecast on Sunday and into later Sunday, maybe getting some traction, maybe generating some very north-angled swell for the U.S. West Coast. But Hawaii, look at this, 1044 millibar bulletproof high-pressure system, 25-knot trades a week from now, just blowing over the Hawaiian Islands. Poor folks there definitely need a break, and it doesn't look like it's coming. What's the effect of those winds on the ocean surface? Well, right now, pretty calm pattern, but we know something's going to develop here off the Kuril Islands. Seas 23 feet, building to 26 feet, almost 30 feet as we get into Monday night, Tuesday, the 21st of February, but then quickly just shunted off to the north. The jet stream is doing this. The storms follow the jet stream track up into the Bering Sea. The system, the gradient-driven system, this isn't even, I'm calling it wind swell, basically, because it's not like an organized low-pressure system, with 25-foot seas on Tuesday, 26 feet early Wednesday, then falling down the coast, 20 to 24-foot seas as we get later into Wednesday, and then 22-foot seas off the coast Thursday and Friday and fading out. Little bits of energy trying to push south of the Aleutian Islands. What is that? 26-foot seas on Saturday in the Gulf of Alaska, followed up by a better system. This is actually an upgrade now as we get into Saturday night, the 25th, with 28 or 29-foot seas pushing through the Gulf, aimed at the U.S. West Coast. Odds are, by the time it gets here, wind will follow along with it. But we'll find out in a second. All right, so wind forecast. Well, all driven by high pressure. There's your 1038 millibar high, generating north winds at 25 knots off of Cape Mendocino, but a light wind regime for the rest of California today. Here is winds circulate clockwise around high pressure. Here is the source of the wind machine for the Hawaiian Islands. It is this high pressure system, and so you have east-southeast winds, 20 knots as we get into Monday. More of the same. Not so bad for California other than Cape Mendocino, but you see the fetch and the gradient pushing down. Wind machine coming for California as we get into Tuesday morning, the 21st, with 20, 25, 30-knot winds in pockets. Trades 20 to 25 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. By Tuesday afternoon, 30 to 35-knot winds from Point Conception northward and 40 knots off of the Pacific Northwest. 20 to 25-knot southeast trades for the Hawaiian Islands. And as we get into Wednesday morning, even 35-knot solid northwest winds for the South California coast. Just a mess everywhere. Trades continue 20-plus knots pushing into the Hawaiian Islands. Thursday, a little bit of relief for California. We'll call it 20, maybe 15 knots in pockets out of the northwest. Trades 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. So we get into Friday, the low starts falling south. A bit of a break in the core of the low for central California and northern California, but west winds for Hawaii, and again, west winds for Hawaii. Southwest winds for Southern California, and trades for the Hawaiian Islands. So we get into Saturday, the whole system finally starts falling apart. We're back about where we started. You see one high pressure here, another high pressure here, trades for the Hawaiian Islands. The low pressure tries to squeeze in the gap as we get into Saturday, but late Saturday night, trades start building. 1048, that's a very strong high pressure system. Not sure if I believe that completely, but still. Trades strong for the Hawaiian Islands, a bit of a break for California. And then Sunday, 1046, millibar high. Trades continue for Hawaii, light winds for California. But you see, here's the next front, fetch and a gradient heading towards the California coast. High pressure actually retrograding off to the west, allowed by the jet stream splitting further off to the west. None of this looks good for, what you would expect as classical swell production. It's all basically north-angled wind swell from the Gulf of Alaska. Take what you can get. It looks like spring is coming. All right, precipitation. Normally we just look at California, but Hawaii, interesting situation. High pressure right here. You can just see the precipitation limited to the outer edges, the periphery, the fringes around the high. Hawaii just been locked in this drenching flow, and more of the same till we get into Tuesday. Well, look at that. Lots of rain for Hawaii. Precipitation falling down the coast, courtesy of the backdoor trough moving into California. Nothing too severe. Snow in the higher levels of the Sierra. Falling south through Tuesday night. Precipitation continuing for Hawaii. Wednesday, light precipitation along the coast. Light snow in the mountains. More rain for Hawaii. So we get into Thursday. A low proper sets up. Precipitation for the entire state, even down into Southern California. More precip for Hawaii. As we get into Friday, more of the same in both locations. Colder temperatures for sure. Pretty good snow. This actually looks like an upgrade as we get into Friday. Yet more snow for the Sierra and rain for California. Now, this is probably not going to be a drenching. This is not an atmospheric river. This is pure La Nina backdoor front, cold air, very light snow, good for skiing, but the question is really how much of it will you get? This is probably a bit overhyped. Precip breaking up for Hawaii a little bit as we get into Saturday. Here comes the next system trying to organize as we get into Sunday. Here's your high pressure, a lighter, not an entrenched rain flow for Hawaii, thank goodness, and we'll go 180 hours out. Here's your next front setting up, and almost a normal pattern for Hawaii in terms of precip. Snow forecast dashboard for Olympic Valley. Well, up to theoretically 65 inches, a little bit of it during the middle part of this week, and then theoretically a bunch more as we get into the week after President's Day week. Kirkwood doing even better, we'll say about 30 inches of snow from the first pulse, and then another 40 inches theoretically or more. There seems to be something going on here with the chart. Not sure exactly why it's doing this, but 72 inches of accumulation. And Mammoth with 2 feet from the first pulse and another 2 feet after that, 4 feet total accumulation. The other big news here is freezing level. Now we're looking at Olympic Valley. Today, temperature's pretty warm. Above freezing at the base for sure. This is the base of Olympic Valley at about 6,200 feet. This is the summit at about 9,000, be the top of Granite Chief Peak or the top of Palisades. And supposedly, and the red would be liquid precipitation. It was raining. The gray, sleet. The dividing line between the gray and the white is the 32, the hard freeze line. Then 28 above that is, or the blue and white transition is 28 degrees. So above freezing temperatures the whole way to the top through tomorrow, and then the front pushes through. The Arctic air blasts down, theoretically freezing the whole way down to sea level, if one believes that. There's been a bit of chatter about this. We don't really believe that's going to happen, but theoretically it's possible. But quickly, right after that, as we get into the 22nd of February, the freezing level, about 3,000 feet, 3,500, maybe bumping up a little bit on the 25th, and then back in the 3 to 4,000 foot range beyond that. So a long stretch of cold air with the high pressure system off the coast, driving the jet stream down towards California, more in the form of backdoor fronts, sucking cold Canadian air down inland, and the whole Pacific Northwest, that whole area expected to be quite cold. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the Madden Julian Oscillation and the El Nino Southern Oscillation? These two weather oscillations are responsible for probably the biggest portion of weather looking out with the MJO up to maybe 6 weeks, something like that. And with El Nino, well, up to 6 or 7 years out. So you can get at least a rough idea of what's going to happen 2 or 3 years into the future. And that's what we're going to try to divine. So we start by looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO, the Madden Julian Oscillation. There's 2 phases, the active phase and the inactive phase. The active phase is the one we're interested in. The MJO, the 2 phases, they rotate around the planet on opposite ends of the planet, active phase on one side, inactive phase on the other. They rotate east to west around the equator. What we're interested in is when the active phase moves over the West Pacific. What that does, the active phase is like a low pressure system. It reduces trade winds. It sucks warm, moist energy off the equator region in the West Pacific, where ocean temperatures are way much warmer, driven there by trades, taking all the warm water, scouring it from the East Pacific and pushing it into the West Pacific. That warm, moist air rises, and when it does that, it gets sucked into the jet stream. That imparts energy to the jet stream, and that, in turn, feeds a strengthening jet stream, a stronger storm track, and theoretically producing surf and weather into California. All right, so what we're looking, and the inactive phase does the exact opposite. It's a high-pressure system. It feeds high-pressure development over the Pacific. It steals energy from the jet stream, weakens it, and then you get a pretty much like what we're in right now. Now, that said, we're looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO. So these are this is wind data from the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino, but we can also use it for looking for hints of the MJO. So the arrows are what we're looking at. This is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here. There's the equator, date line right there. New Guinea right there. The arrows showing wind speed. The longer the arrows, the stronger the winds. So pretty strong easterly trades over the East Pacific, medium to strong trades over the Central Pacific, and medium trades over the West Pacific, the Kelvin wave generation area. But it is not the actual wind speeds, it's the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. So yeah, winds are blowing pretty strong over the East Pacific, but looking at the arrows here, they're going nowhere, which means these winds are actually typical for this time of year, if not maybe even a little bit weaker. Same thing over the Central Pacific. There's no east-west component to it. And even over the Kelvin wave generation area, just a little bit stronger hints out of the east, but pretty much just dead neutral everywhere. So not the inactive phase of the MJO, because all these arrows would be nuking out of the east, but not the active phase yet. But also remember, this is a 5-day mean, so this is running about 3 or 4 days behind what's really happening at the surface. This is a small chart, but this shows the same thing, what's been happening for the past 5 days. All right, South America there, Central America there, Hawaii right about there, New Guinea right there, the equator there, dateline there. The Kelvin wave generation area, when the active phase of the MJO moves over the West Pacific, if it's between about here and 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, if you get westerly anomalies in there, then you can create a Kelvin wave. That is, the prevailing winds weaken compared to normal, Coriolis forces kick in and take warm water that's typically there, start pushing it east, not on the ocean surface, but underneath the equator, down about 150 meters. Takes 3 months for that ball of warm water to make it from here to here, but eventually it will erupt off of Ecuador as it impacts the coast, create a warm water slick there. If you get successive active phases of the MJO, active phase, and successive Kelvin waves, that can help usher in El Nino, exactly what we're looking for right now. All right, so 13th of February, we had a little bit of westerly anomalies here in the Kelvin wave generation area. Building on the 14th, the 15th, the 16th, and the 17th. Look at this. We have westerly anomalies filling the Kelvin wave past the date line almost to a point south of Hawaii. That was as the 17th, and we're 2 days past that now. So this is exactly where we want to be. So what's the forecast for the next week? All right, so this is again the east-west component of the wind, but this is the whole planet on one chart. It's not, there's no land here. They just took the land out of it. But the far west Pacific starts about 125 east, so a line right up about there. Okay, the date line right there. The Kelvin wave generation area ends right about there. That's what we're interested in, is this area right here. Because we're one, interested in seeing production of Kelvin waves, and two, we're looking for energy being imparted to the jet stream. Now, the blues and purples are easterly anomalies. The La Nina signal, or at a minimum, The inactive phase of the MJO. Massive easterly wind burst occurred here the first part of February. That likely has set up this high pressure regime that's just locked in place right now. This is the strongest easterly wind burst we've seen in a couple of years. So no surprise the jet stream is split. No surprise that things are locked in place. Now that said, westerly anomalies, the reds and yellows here, started pushing into the Kelvin wave generation area about the same time, and as of today down here are filling theoretically the whole way south of California, the whole way into Ecuador. Ecuador is like over here. So the entire equatorial Pacific is covered with westerly anomalies right now. One would think that the high pressure regime would break down, the jet stream would start raging, but it hasn't done that, and can't quite explain why, other than just this persistent easterly pattern, and then this major blast of easterly anomalies here just reinforced a pre-existing pattern it's a La Nina pattern, and 4 days of westerly anomalies just isn't enough to overcome it. Now, looking out the next week, we see westerly anomalies pretty much in control of the Kelvin wave generation area and most of the Pacific for the next week. So that is a point in the right direction. All right, so let's go out 2 weeks. Now, this is not winds. This is outgoing long wave radiation, cloud cover, but still pretty good proxy for what's going on with the MJO. The blues are cloudier than normal skies. If the active phase of the MJO is a low pressure system and it's sucking air up into the atmosphere, warm, moist air, well, it's going to make clouds. So one can say this is the active phase of the MJO. The inactive phase of the MJO right here. Reds are positive anomalies, more sunlight reflection off the ocean surface, like pure high pressure there. So this would be the inactive phase. And let's orient ourselves. South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea right there, dateline right there, equator right there, Kelvin wave generation area right here. The Kelvin wave generation area full of the active phase of the MJO, no surprise right now. Continuing, this is per the statistic model, 5 days out from now, 10 days from now, and then easing east and almost out of the Kelvin wave generation area 2 weeks from now, with the inactive phase starting to move into the West Pacific. The dynamic model tells a little bit different picture, though. Active phase, neutral, active phase rebuilding 2 weeks from now. So you can see there's a little bit of a difference between the two models. Let's dig deeper and see even if we can explain that difference. Phase diagrams for the statistic model and the dynamic model right there. This, how do you read this? Well, the active phase, this is mapping the active phase of the MJO. The MJO moves from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent, over the West Pacific to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase is. These little squigglies here are where it's been. So this would be, what, January, February. Here's where it is today. So the further this dot, that's where the active phase is today. Further it is away from the circle, the stronger it is. So a modest active phase, we'll say in the Central Pacific, per the statistic model, 3 different possible outcomes, but all have it basically over Africa and very weak. Now the dynamic model shows the active phase making it to Africa, then quickly looping back and returning at weak status to the West Pacific 2 weeks from now. Hence that previous chart we saw the dynamic model showing the active phase rebuilding in the West Pacific. This is exactly what we want to see. We really want to see it up here somewhere, but at least it's a start if you believe this. Who knows? Typically reality is somewhere between these two models, so it's a bit early to guess, but we got an idea at least. And then next up, the upper level model showing areas favorable for precipitation. The green's favorable. Think of that as the active phase. The oranges and reds, the inactive phase, dry air. And let's get ourselves organized here. South America, Central America, New Guinea there, the equator right there, dateline roughly out here, Kelvin wave generation area right here. And this is up at the jet stream level, so it runs about a week ahead of what goes on at the surface. So this shows greens, areas favorable precipitation, the active phase of the MJO, pretty much filling the Pacific today, continuing on and then moving off to the east we'll say somewhere around the end of the first week of March, and the active phase into Ecuador as we get late in March. The inactive phase moving into the Kelvin wave generation area, we'll say first week of March, something like that, pretty much in control of the Pacific, but with an active phase starting to develop at the end of the model run, the end of March. So whatever's going to happen from the active phase of the MJO, it should be starting to do it right now. All right, the 1 month forecast from the CFS model. Again, east-west component of the winds, the blues, easterly anomalies, the reds, westerly anomalies, the date line running right up the middle here. Kelvin wave generation area starting about 125 east, so right in here. All right, now this shows this dotted contour here. That's the inactive phase of the MJO and that big easterly wind burst in early February. That's all but gone. The solid contour, active phase of the MJO, pretty much at its peak as of February 18th across the Kelvin wave generation area. Expected to continue for the next week to week and a half, something like that, with solid westerly anomalies in control of the Kelvin wave generation area. As we get past a week out, though, westerly anomalies to persist, filling half the Kelvin wave generation area with weak and fading easterly anomalies on the date line. The transition away from, this was like the final gasp of La Nina right here, and then the last little bits of it trying to get set up as westerly anomalies start building, and we think the El Nino signal starts developing over the West Pacific. And then finally, the 3 month CFS model. So this is past performance here. The forecast is the future. If there was ever a stark contrast between what has been and what is going to be, you can see it here. Here's the date line running right up the middle. It's all about what's happening in the Kelvin wave generation area from 125 east to 170 west. You can see we were steady easterly anomalies filling the Kelvin wave generation area for 2.5 years now, the La Nina signal, with occasional little bursts right here. This was the active phase of the MJO in December and January that gave us all that rain and fed energy into the jet stream. We were expecting the same thing to happen here, and I think it will, but not exactly the way we thought. We were kind of thinking atmospheric river type event, but no, this looks like because of these easterly anomalies, and this is just kind of a guess, the high pressure regime has just been like really strengthened, but it's going to retrograde. So this will feed energy to the jet and set up a series of backdoor troughs over California and providing moisture. Any moisture is good. We'll take it any way we can. But from a surf perspective, not at all the ideal outcome that we were hoping for. But one can also clearly see westerly anomalies building and strong. I mean, this looks like a major westerly wind burst event if it were to happen starting late in March and continuing for 2 months, the whole way into late in May. I mean, that's hard to believe. Again, this is a forecast model going out 3 months, so we don't believe it, but pretty interesting here. All right, so we're going to overlay the MJO. Dotted contour here, that was the fading and now gone inactive phase of the MJO. Here's our active phase of the MJO, forecast to make it the whole way almost to Ecuador about a week and a half from now, and holding in some fashion over the Central Pacific till April, what is that, February, March, 2 months from now. And notice, even with the inactive phase of the MJO forecast setting up, strong westerly anomalies just pummeling the entire Western and Central Pacific. If that would ever be the sign of the high pressure regime getting broken down and smashed, this is it. If it happens, we thought this active phase of the MJO in and of itself would do it, and we still think this is strong enough to produce a Kelvin wave, but it's not enough. Just the remains of La Nina, or the residuals of La Nina, are so strong. There's so much momentum in the atmosphere from 2.5 years of it. We were hoping that this would punch a hole in it, but clearly it has not. We'll take whatever we can get, but clearly something is changing in the atmosphere, and it's a definite push towards El Nino if we're not already close to being there now. All right, so let's go take a look down in the ocean. let's look at subsurface temperatures. This is data from the TAO buoy array. Again, this is the East Pacific here, the West Pacific here. And we're looking at temperatures. How do we get this? We'll see these little X's. These are the anchor lines on the buoys, the TAA buoy array. The X's are sensors attached to those anchor lines. The sensors collect data, use a model to fill in the gaps. You get a profile of what's going on temperature-wise. The 28-degree isotherm locked pretty much where it was and too far to the west right now, driven by that strong easterly wind burst. We want to see this at least over at 180, if not encroaching off to the east, but it's not doing it. It's maybe moved a degree or two to the east. 26-degree isotherm at 150. I think it was over at 153 last week, so it's easing off to the east. But the important thing is the 24-degree isotherm is nice and thick and building in the East Pacific. No signs of coolness in this area, typically symptomatic of La Nina. No signs of that. But it is not the actual temperatures. It is the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. And we see a 3-degree ball of warm water in the far West Pacific. It's been there, been driven by easterly anomalies for 2.5 years now. But the active phase of the MJO that occurred in the Christmas time frame has produced a Kelvin wave, warm water pushing the whole way across the Pacific, starting to rise up and build remnants of a previous Kelvin wave back, I don't even remember when it was, a couple months before that, in the far East Pacific, a healthy flow, a river of warm water pushing off to the east, and no cold water at all in the picture anymore. It appears that La Nina is dead. Let's go look at another model. Here's a higher res version. It shows the warm water only making it to about 120 west, so that'd be south of California. Little pocket of cool water here in the east, and the remnants of the previous Kelvin wave hanging far off to the east. We think this is probably a little bit too conservative, and this runs a week behind, and we'll show you why in a minute. Sea level anomalies for the Pacific. So let's get ourselves oriented. Chile, Peru, Ecuador, the Galapagos right there. South America, Hawaii there, the equator there, the dateline there, New Guinea there. This is showing you not temperatures, but the height of the sphere of the ocean. If you use satellite data, you strip away all the wind waves, all the swell, all the tides, and is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? Cold water at depth contracts, it'll create a divot on the ocean surface. Warm water likewise expands to create a bump on the ocean surface. You see here in the West Pacific, there's New Guinea, 20, 25, 25, 30 centimeters anomalies, and it's really just 5 degrees north and south of the equator that we're interested in. You see piles of warm water here just bleeding out from the maritime continent and just sitting right here. There has been steady, strong easterly anomalies. You can see it actually trying to push a hole in the warm water pocket there. But also notice here, pretty much dead neutral anomalies the whole way across the Pacific, other than this one little pocket of barely 5 centimeter below normal anomalies right here. Pretty much warm water in control, according to this. Upper ocean heat anomalies for the area from 100 west, so that's almost Ecuador to the dateline. You can see we had a Kelvin wave, warm water building in volume across the Pacific back in summer. Then we fell into a deep, dark La Nina hole the whole way through fall with literally no meaningful surf at all. Then we got our first little push of a Kelvin wave in December. The second Kelvin wave starting to build, and we think there's a third that's in development right now from the active phase of the MJO. Exactly what you want to see if you're transitioning from La Nina towards El Nino. Then here we go, upper ocean heat anomalies. All right, West Pacific here, East Pacific here. There's actual temperatures. We can go back a year, March 2022. Cold water, remnants of a Kelvin wave, fading off of Ecuador. Cold upwelling phase. We had two active sort of an elongated active phase that tried to get going last spring, produced a Kelvin wave, but as soon as it faded, just this massive upwelling response. But then we got a little Kelvin wave back in November, not super impressive. Upwelling phase, a second Kelvin wave is in development right now, trying to make its way across the Pacific to about 128 west, something like that. So that's south of California. And we think another Kelvin wave is likely to be generated by the active phase of the MJO that's occurring now. Notice this steadily building warm water pool here, just charging a little bit from the second Kelvin wave, but we think it's going to continue to build. Surface water temperatures. This is anomalies, difference from normal for this time of year. Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Central America, Hawaii. All right, the blues colder than normal temperatures, and they are still there. The fading remnants of La Nina continuing to get weaker. They were down below 20 south at one point. They're at about 18 south and retracting almost daily, and retracting from the Peruvian coast almost daily. And the depth of the coolness out here, all but gone. See the dark blues up here? That was filling all this area even 2 weeks ago. It's all but gone. Couple little stray pockets. So, but what is to really be noticed is this warming here off of Ecuador. A strong warming signal, strong warming off of all of Peru and all around the edges of what was La Nina. Still is at the moment officially, but it looks like it's doomed. The 7-day trend clearly picking up major warming here over the Galapagos and off of Peru. Steady warming over the entire equatorial Pacific. The official El Nino monitoring region, 120 west to 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. Clearly no sign of cooling there, warming. And when you get this warming going here and the trades pick up that warm water, they'll start dragging it into the official El Nino monitoring region. So this area is actually the lagging indicator of what's going on over here and atmospherically. A machine has to get driving all this, but it's the most conservative view, and that's probably a good way to be. And then finally the backed off view again, warming off of the Galapagos and Ecuador and all around Peru. Trade's going to grab this at some point, drag it across the Pacific, and a steadily weakening temperature or steadily building temperature regime over the equator in the central Pacific. Sea surface temperature index for the Nino 1.2 region, that's the area by the Galapagos and Ecuador, up even higher today, plus 1.175. Now, the threshold for El Nino, La Nina, neutral is half a degree below to half a degree above. We're clearly above that, but this is not the official region. This is the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino region, but we're going to say this data is complete bogus because we've got other data from NOAA that says temperatures are at least half a degree. They're below normal, but they're not below the half a degree threshold, suggesting ENSO neutral. So here's the temperatures. Here's the other data for the Nino 1.2 region. There's the 0 degree line. Temperatures way above that. The Nino 3.4 region, well, that's half a degree below, and temperatures right at that now. So suggesting that we are right on the cusp of being ENSO neutral. Clearly, the atmosphere is still thinking we're in La Nina, but oceanically and a bunch of other signs are saying, even if we are in La Nina, it isn't going to last very long. All right, so what's going on in the atmosphere? Well, we can look at the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Tahiti in the Pacific, Darwin in the Indian Ocean. When pressure is lower in Tahiti, the index, this daily contribution, goes negative. Today, we're at plus 4.18, but look where we were. We were up in the 20s almost consistently for a month now. You get, though, this feeling. I mean, we were solid in the 20s for almost 2 years. We're getting these little more frequent dips in the index here, and the inactive, or when the active phase of the MJO starts building, it drives this index down. You can take the noise out of all this. 30-day average, well, still plus 13.31. We want to see all this start turning negative. We were 16.38. And we've been sort of bouncing around over the last month. No real significant change yet atmospherically, hence the high pressure and the trades in Hawaii. 90-day averages is your El Nino, La Nina indicator. This would be your active, inactive phase of the MJO. Current value still positive, 14.43, and actually higher now than what it was a month ago. But remember, this is a 90-day average, so it's taking in 3 months worth of data. This is probably the closest indicator to get somewhat of a 3 to 4 week delayed view of what's happening atmospherically. Here's the 30-day moving SOI graphed out. The upward spikes are the inactive phase of the MJO. You can see here the downward spikes are the active phase of the MJO. 0 is neutral. We've been way above that for a long time in La Nina territory. We started crashing here in January. We've gone through a little up phase, but we expect with the current active phase of the MJO, this is going to continue to drop. Will we get to 0? Well, when we do, that will be earth-shattering news, because that will be, I'd say from a purely conservative standpoint, that would be a good sign that the La Nina regime that we've been in for nearly 3 years now is dead. My guess is it's going to take us at least a month, if not more, to get there, though. And then finally, the sea surface temperature anomaly forecast for the Nino 3.4 region from the CFS version 2 model. This is the official El Nino monitoring region. Where are we? Well, we're in February. We theoretically, according to this, we moved into ENSO neutral from an ocean temperature perspective, was it February 15th, so a couple of days ago, and we are going to continue to go to dead neutral, maybe the last week of March, the first week of April, something like that, and then steadily warming from there into minimal El Nino territory as we get into June, and then heading up from there in up to 1 degree above normal. Now remember, half degree above normal is your El Nino threshold. As we get into October and November, 1 degree, and that's the PDF corrected. The raw data says temperatures up to 1.25 degrees above normal as we get into the fall. So the general trend here is moving quickly out of La Nina and into El Nino. By next week, we should have the consensus model updated, and we'll be able to take a look at what all the other models are saying. But they've all been generally basically following along what this model says, so we don't expect any significant surprises. All right, so a bit of disappointment here. That was the bad news we talked about earlier, and that is that the active phase of the MJO that we're in has not punched a hole and super energized the jet stream as we were expecting. The good news is, though, precipitation is still coming for California. The actual high-pressure, bulletproof La Nina signal is going to retrograde even further off to the west, allowing backdoor fronts pushing into California. And looking at some of the long-range model, that pattern's supposed to go on for multiple weeks. So we'll take precipitation any way we can get it. We need to top off the reservoirs and build the snowpack even more so that we can make it through maybe several winters beyond or several years beyond. We've been in drought for a long time. It's going to take a bit to refresh the aquifer. All right, shorter term though, looking for swells. Well, no major swell producing storms are forecast, but it seems kind of hard to believe that with El Nino building that the high pressure bubble is not going to burst at some point. Maybe in the later part of spring, somewhere in mid-spring, something like that, and that some sort of a late season pulse of swell isn't going to happen. It should happen. I mean, we've been saying this for months now. It hadn't happened. If anything, right now it looks like, well, spring's on the way and it's all over, but it's still only mid-February or so. So we're not going to give up hope just yet, but not quite as exciting as we were hoping for. Anyway, we'll take snow and precipitation any way we can get it. And then beyond that, well, maybe El Nino as we get much later into this year. All right, that's the video for this week. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. Like and subscribe. Subscribing is a good thing. You'll get automatic notifications when we post the videos, typically on Sunday evenings. You can also get the links to the video, the top of stormsurf.com. There's a link at the top of every page in the site there. And other than that, we'll do this again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.